And I don't know
Oh,
how
we
many
can
people are
stop.
still hanging
Let's
on.
hang a little longer because I have some specific questions
Okay.
asked me by someone, and I promised to ask Jim about them.
Okay. Well, I'm going to take a look.
Okay.
So y'all
This will
talk.
take up the next hour. This might be our longest podcast.
Here, I'll act like SpongeBob is me.
Okay. This
I'll be back.
friend of mine, who is a traditional bow hunter, has injured his shoulder, and it's not going to recover. So
They're done
he's
that.
going to have to start crossbow hunting.
Yeah.
And so he asked me a bunch of questions, and I said, we got this podcast coming up. I will ask the expert, and you watch this podcast, and we will have the answers to your questions. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 questions here.
I always get nervous when you refer to me as the expert. Okay, how are they setting me up here?
Nix is a has
I'll do the best I can.
Is a squirt of water coming out.
Yeah.
Okay. His first one is arrow spine a major issue with a crossbow, since crossbows are true center shots?
Yes, arrow spine's an issue with. I don't think the center shot thing has a. Well, I guess it would. You're not wrapping it around the riser like they talk about with a traditional bow, but anytime
you're going to flex around or bend around that rail.
No, they'll bounce away from the rail.
Well,
during the course of that flexing.
Yeah, well, that's the same thing you do with a bow. We bend around it. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole thing happens long before the rail becomes involved. And that is, you kick that arrow in the ass with a 250 or 350 pounds of force, and it's going to take a certain amount of time to get that broadhead and stuff in motion. But in the meantime, the back end of that arrow is already in motion. So
yes,
that flexing doesn't have anything to do with the riser at that point. It has to do with putting pressure on one end of that bow so fast and so much pressure that the front end doesn't have time to overcome its momentum before it recoils and gets out of there. So did that answer your question sufficiently?
I think so. And we've addressed some of these things in part, but I promised him I would ask these.
And you can do the same thing, just take a twig or something and push on it from one end, have the other end in the dirt or up against the wall or whatever, and push it and bend the twig. That's your archer's paradox right there. And it does the same thing. Anytime you put pressure on one end of it before the other end gets a chance to start moving, well, you're going to have some flex in there.
Okay. His second question he had, we've pretty well addressed it, but we'll get it specific. He said, does EFOC or Ultra EFOC have any advantages for crossbow bolts?
Yes. And the advantage is not because it's a crossbow or what launches it. They're like you were talking about, that one that uses a hydraulic piston and compressed air and all that. The EFOC comes into play when it gets to the other end of its flight, and that is when it hits a target. Now, for target archers, where you're just wanting to punch a hole in a piece of paper, and then you want your arrow to stop within that target so that you can pull it back out and shoot it again, then that's not an important factor. So that's why a lot of target arrows are using, lightweight points and lightweight arrows.
I'll throw something in on that. It's been several years now, but a fellow corresponded with me from Germany, and he was the current world champion competition crossbow shooter.
Oh wow. Okay.
And
Yeah.
he was using EFOC bolts because he got more stable flight at the longer ranges.
Exactly. Exactly. And
And, and so people, some target competitors with crossbows have been using EFOC for a couple of decades
yeah.
now.
Listen,
Yeah.
it's not, nobody talks about this, but in the 5 spot world and the Vegas shoots and all that, a lot of those cats are shooting 200 grain glue in points and they just don't tell anybody.
Ah. Okay.
And
Yeah.
a lot of them shoot feathers,
Yep.
from what I've
Oh
heard.
yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I know for a
So,
fact that the 200 grain points is not an unusual thing in the 20-yard, like spot shooting stuff.
right.
A friend of mine who used to run the archery shop here, this is 15 or 20 years ago when I was first starting to play around, maybe 15 when I started to play around with heavier stuff. He was like, "You don't need that for hunting." And he was shooting real fat arrows, getting ready for a 5 spot shoot that they were going to have locally or whatever. And I pulled
Okay.
one of his arrows for him, and I said, "What the hell is that?" I could feel it. And he goes, "Well, that's different." I'm like, "What? What? I had to back up here.
Yeah.
Why are you shooting a 200 grain point?" "Well, it's only 20 yards." And he said, "They seem to be more accurate." And I was like, I said, "You're so burned right now, dude, because you're the mechanical broadhead 350 grain arrow selling this guy I know. But when you want accuracy, you're going to shoot a 200 grain point. You want consistent arrow flight." Okay, so all square here. Get off my ass.
But
He was.
think about this. Have you ever played badminton
Right.
or seen a badminton shuttlecock? So you got this ping pong ball or this big old ball on one end, you got some feathers on the other end. When you slap that thing with your what do you call it?
Racket.
Racket. Yeah. When you slap that thing with your racket, it goes across the net there, and the ping pong ball is in front, and the feathers are in the back. Okay. The other guy hits that thing and maybe he puts a little English on it to make it go high or left or right or whatever. And when that shuttlecock comes back across the net, the ping pong ball is in front and the feathers are in the back. No
Mm-hmm.
matter how hard you hit it, no matter what English you put on it or what English hit it at, when it goes across to the other side, the ping pong ball is in front, the feathers are in the back. That's the way you want your arrows to act. You want those arrows to follow that broadhead like a pit bull following a pork chop. And so that's kind of the whole thing. Uh,
I've
and
tried to
so
describe it as you put a big heavy bullet on a tail, right? You're putting a big heavy bullet, and there's just, all the tail is there to do is to correct for wind and maybe a little shooting error. That's its
it's just
goal.
it's just to keep that back in the back. And
Right. That's
so
the only thing it's for.
yeah. Now if you go down and you rent a U-Haul trailer, okay, and you're gonna load up some stuff and you know take it to your ex-wife or your kid in college or whatever,
Set
right?
it on fire.
Well, well, you're going to see a big old arrow painted on the side of that U-Haul trailer, and it's going to be pointing right to the front axle of it, and it's going to say load 60% of your weight in front of this line, in front of this arrow. And if you do that, that U-Haul trailer will follow you wherever you go. And if you don't do that, that U-Haul will be trying to pass you every time you slow down, every time you come to a downhill grade, or sometimes if you're just going along on a flat, it'll try to pass you because that's the FOC part. You need that weight in the front to keep everything going straight and level and
I
flying
never
correct.
thought about that. Good on you. Now I have another thing to talk about as I'm rattling about this stuff. But The U-Haul
Yeah.
thing, that's awesome. Everybody's seen that. The arrow, and nobody questions it. They just say, see the arrow, load up, load, put the washer, dryer, the fridge, all the stuff in the front, put all the boxes in the back.
Right. Exactly. And so that's what you want to do with your arrow. You want to put more weight up front and less weight in the back. Now, if you go in there and you load every single thing you got right in the front foot or two of that U-Haul, it'll pull beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go in there and you put everything, just walk up to it and set it in the back end of it, you'll be fighting that thing. Probably end up with it passing you on
Yeah,
a hill somewhere.
it'll be swimming like a bad caboose.
That's right. You'll be talking to your insurance agent, you know. So that's kind of the way it is with the arrows. And the FOC thing was tremendous, tremendous. And like I said, I started out at first using off the shelf stuff. And so my first trip to Africa, I took off the shelf arrows, off the shelf broadheads and everything. The next time I went over there, I had selected some broadheads that were heavier and found that they shot better.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got to read, finally tracked down the id stuff there and got to reading it and doing a little more research in it. And it just went on from there. I just got crazy about it because it works. And there's a pretty good little video clip on Alaska Bowhunters website that shows an arrow hitting, I believe it is the scapula of a moose, probably. But that arrow comes in and hits, and the arrow's flying fairly well, and it hits, and you can see the ripples going down that arrow as it, coils up and everything. Once that broadhead breaks through that bone and starts out, it pulls that arrow through that hole and straightens it out just like you're straightening out a piece of string or something in your hand. And it's a good example of what happens when the broadhead is actually pulling the arrow through.
We
Everything
caught that
is-
on video a couple of times. And this summer, when the hunting public comes back, we're going to shoot 400, 350, 300, and 250 spine arrows into like the head of a pig and want to see the bending of it.
Right.
I didn't have the test prepped. We shot a 250 spine arrow with a single bevel on it. And, you can see it coming. It's a beautiful video. And when it hits the pig, you see the shaft bend a little bit. It buckles and then springs, and the arrow went 20 yards past it. We shot it right through the center of the head. I mean, it just went, we had to go looking for it. But I want to shoot some lower spine arrows and see what the buckling difference is, because that's dragging on the hole. It's not helping anything.
Right. It's wiggling around and dragging on the hole as it goes.
Not to mention the actual mass of the shaft is going, broadhead's up here and the shaft's buckled. Well, that mass is going this way. It's not going this way. It can't.
Right.
It's just a directional force. So, God, this is such a rabbit hole. There's so much to it. It's just unbelievable. And then it becomes more simple. I said it earlier, I don't know, hour and a half ago. When you realize how important the arrow is and the launcher isn't that important, it's got to be tuned and all that. I got you. But the arrows are so much more important than the launcher.
Yep.
It's just
while we were on that issue there, I think it's important that Ed talks about this 650 grain threshold, bone breaking threshold. Ed, were you going to address that later? Did you have that on your?
Wasn't planning on it because we've hit it so many different times, but it seems to be immovable. Now, we haven't verified it with Crossbows yet, but Rob has pretty much re-verified that with heavy modern compounds, and you still need that arrow mass to get through heavy bone.
Well, that's one of those things that happens at the other end of the deal. It doesn't matter what gets it there. It's, crossbows. It's going to be the same for the crossbow, I think. And but one thing about it is when you say that 650 grain threshold, there are people out there, and I've seen comments on the internet and stuff about it, and they're building that arrow from the back end. They're building the arrow part, not the point part.
Yep.
So they're choosing big old heavy shafts and stuff like that to get that 650 grains. And I personally think that they need to be working on the other end of that first.
Yeah, well, you'll notice 12 factors, that the arrow weight is well down. FOC is much more important than arrow weight, except it does not apply to the heavy bone threshold. I tested with EFOC and ultra EFOC arrows, and it did not move it. But what it did do is when I had a broadhead, any broadhead, that breached the bone, the total outcome penetration went way up when we had EFOC or ultra EFOC.
There you go. That's the part we need.
Post breaching.
Yeah, that's the part we need to emphasize is that, shooting a wooden stick out there or an arrow with a liner in it or something like that doesn't do exactly the same thing as shooting one with a good EFOC on it. One of the things, like I was telling you about shooting those ultra heavy arrows with 2,000 and 3,000 grains. Yeah, they did a number on stuff when they hit down there, but they wouldn't be something you'd want to hunt with because they were unstable and they didn't fly right.
Oh yeah, you're talking about FOC in 10 or 11 because you've got a heavy everything.
Yeah, yeah, and so I think a lot of people get that 650 grain thing and they immediately go out and start buying heavy arrows rather than heavier points. And of course, you can buy heavy arrows a lot cheaper than you can buy, 400 and 500 grain broadheads.
Mm-hmm.
You get into those good quality broadheads and you're looking at 40, 50, 60 bucks a piece.
Mm-hmm.
And arrow shafts, $29, $30 a piece. So many people that I've noticed make those judgments based on the dollar figure rather than on the performance they're trying to get. And I ran into this in one of the websites there. Guy was making a big deal that he'd found this sale on eBay for some arrow shafts, and they were like, $2.98, whatever a piece. Yeah. And I said, you're talking about kicking that arrow in the ass with a 350, 400 pound crossbow, and even a 200 pound crossbow, and that shaft is like 2 or 3 inches from your eyes. Mm-hmm. So that's not the place you want to save money.
That's right.
And so, like I said, if you're going to go out and get good performance and everything, you need to take your time, build these things right, and follow those 12 factors and do all of that stuff and practice. And then you can go out and shoot hippo without the arrow bouncing out, or you can shoot Cape Buffalo with it, whatever you want to shoot. You design that arrow to shoot that animal and practice with it. But that doesn't come quick and it doesn't come cheap.
That's for sure. Spare no expense, right, Ed?
No expense. That's right. Okay.
In the whole lifetime of that arrow, there's a fraction of a second where all of that pays off. Yeah, and that's when it hits that animal. Just a very, very small fraction of a second. But that's where payday is right there.
Okay, our next one of these questions. This is your last easy one that we have sort of addressed. Then he's got 4 questions we hadn't addressed at all yet.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay. His next question was, is point broadhead weight the only way to get EFOC?
No, that's a easy, quick way to start achieving that. But sometimes you can, I guess. But if you start getting up into 30% range, you're going to have to start putting more weight in there other than what you can get with a broadhead. Now, if you're happy with 15, 20, 21% FOC, then you probably can do that with a broadhead.
Well, I think it's real important people try to hit that 19% because that was the first place using identical arrows, external dimensions, identical broadheads, everything, that I could definitely measure a dramatic penetration increase just because of FOC.
That
So if you can get 19% or more, it starts going up at 19%.
Yeah.
Every 1% increase from there builds on the penetration you're going to get. There is another big jump up between 25 and 26%, where the curve takes an abrupt upward swing, and a third one where it goes up when you exceed 30%.
The unicorn arrow, I call it, because they're hard to build.
That's the unicorn arrow.
They're unicorn arrows because they're really hard to build. You got to want to do 30%.
Yeah. That's right. You spare no expense when you're getting to that because it's not cheap.
Sitting right here is 715, and it's somewhere around 27 and a half, and it's been unstoppable on everything I've shot with it.
Yeah.
But 30s, whoo, got to want to, because you got to keep arrow flight too. As you said, Jim, there's a lot of time.
Right.
Yeah. Rob is using about 30, right at 32% on his Cape Buffalo arrows.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what I try to get. But it's that same old thing, just more is better. And I've never got over about 33 or 35, something like that. But man, it was extraordinary to get that. A lot of time, a lot of effort. But when you stick an arrow on a quartering away shot completely through a hippo and have it out there in the riverbed somewhere, well, that's the payoff there. And you're 10,000 miles from home. Yeah.
That's a lot of
5 or 6 feet, couple of bones that are probably 5/8 of an inch thick or 3/4, and like that, and that's the payoff right there. And
okay, we can go into his 4 questions that we haven't addressed.
Okay.
First of all, is there an advantage with a crossbow to using a 4-fletched arrow?
That's the question I was going to ask Troy. He was counting the 4-fletch there at one time, and I've tried those on traditional bows, not on crossbows. Most crossbows are set up for a 3-fletch. So if you're shooting a crossbow with a rail, then it's got a track down the middle of that rail for one of your vanes, and that's set up for a 3-fletch, because when you get out there on the end, it goes through your stirrup and all that stuff, and you're going to hang that thing up on a cable or a stirrup or something if it's not in the right place.
I would think there would be advantages to it from, just to have the extra stability, and it's kind of square. The reason why I shoot 4-fletch is because of something Mr. Ashby said, which is on follow-up shots, you don't have to look down.
Okay.
Yep, that's the 4-fletch on a traditional bow. That would not be an advantage, I don't think, on a crossbow.
On a compound bow, it's the same problem, though, as a trad bow, is if you put it on upside down, you'll hit the cables.
Yeah.
So that's why I
Yeah.
shoot four fletch. I mean,
Now
primarily that's why I shoot four fletch. It's not a stability issue because I bare shaft everything. It doesn't, stability is not even a problem.
I heard you say that on one of your videos, and I was practicing on my trad bow, and so I tried that, and it makes a difference. I
Yeah.
think it
It
was the
does
video
make a
you were
difference.
doing about the. I think it was the video you were doing about knock tuning, and so I
Mhm.
was trying out the knock tuning on everything I had in sight, and I tried it on one of my four fletches, and it's not quite accurate to say that you don't have to look at it and it doesn't make any difference. Because if you turn that thing over, it hits different. And
Yeah, it
No,
is
I would
a
100%
trade-off.
agree with that. But the downside is if you put it on upside down with a three fletch, you know you're kicking.
oh yeah, yeah,
Right. So it's kind of
yeah, you
the lesser of two evils, right?
right,
You know it's not going to
right.
be perfect, but I know for
Yeah.
a fact an upside down three fletch
Oh,
that
it
cock vane is
goes
going to hit the
wonky.
shelf
Yeah,
and off it
Yeah,
goes.
it goes wonky. Yeah.
So
where I got to using it off of vertical bow was that there are times I needed a very fast second shot.
yeah,
Like I
Yep.
shot two pigs
try to
8
grab something
seconds
here.
apart. I didn't have time to make sure it was turned right. Now I didn't start doing that until it became darn near impossible to buy an index knock, which had a big projection on it that you could
Yeah.
feel with your thumb
Yeah,
when
they
you
don't make
rotated
them like that
it and you put it in the arrow.
Yeah.
They don't. Nobody. Yeah, they're just not
I think
available
I still
anymore.
have some of those.
I still have some, and they were very useful. But when I couldn't get those, I started using four fletch for the times I needed that quick shot.
Right.
I have
Yeah.
some.
And
I
that
used
was
to have some for my wood arrow days.
Yep. Okay, here we go down the big rabbit hole. His next question is, could you tell us your process for tuning your arrows to the crossbow?
Oh, jeez. That is a rabbit
That's
hole.
another
Like I
podcast.
That's the rabbit hole.
said. Well, like I said, we're talking about taking a year to design an arrow for one animal. So, uh, but okay. So my process for doing what now? Tuning an
tuning
arrow.
a crossbow bolt.
Tuning your arrows to the
Okay.
crossbow.
Okay. Well, first of all, now we don't need to worry about knock tuning because, in my case anyway, uh, the knocks are flat knocks. Now, if you've got half moon knocks, it'd be a little different. You'd have to worry about that a little bit. But so I didn't have to worry about that one so much. But I do pay attention to which vein goes down in the track of the rail.
So you're putting it in the same position every time.
Right. Well, yeah. I've got a cock feather on there, just like your regular.
I hope you're enjoying the video. Here's a little statement from Dr. Ed about the Ashby Bow Hunting Foundation. He actually typed it up for me so I'd get it right. The Ashby Bow Hunting Foundation conducts independent testing on arrows and broadheads and shares the results with the global bow hunting community free of charge. The foundation does not accept donations from the archery industry, ensuring the testing remains as unbiased as possible. If you appreciate this video, please support the Ashby Bow Hunting Foundation with a donation. Your contributions are vital for the research. They are tax deductible. The foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. All of our directors serve voluntarily. 100% of your donation benefits our projects. You can designate your donation to the General Operating Fund, the Youth Education Fund, or both. Visit www.ashbybowhunting.org and help the foundation make an impact on bow hunting for the long term.
Traditional bows. And so I play with that. So I'll fletch them and then I'll mark the fletching is 1, 2, 3, and I'll put one down and shoot it, put one down and shoot it, then put two down and shoot it 2 or 3 times like that, and get a feel for what it's doing. But the thing is, what I have found is that is individual to the individual arrow. So if you're going to take a dozen arrows, you're talking about 12, probably a day or even 2 days of shooting these things, just one vein at a time. So you're talking.
You're essentially
addressing
not
one of
tuning
these
it
other
though, right?
questions too.
To what
Yeah,
now?
you're addressing one of his other questions that I hadn't asked yet, which was
Uh-oh.
not tuning. And
Oh, okay.
now with the U-shaped nocks,
Yeah, the half moon notch. Yeah.
I can see how it could be important to
Oh,
knock tune.
Yeah. Now,
But even with a
going on
flat,
with the
would
tuning.
there be an advantage to rotating that knock to find the best place?
Yes. And then again, you have to be careful with the orientation of your cables and all that stuff, whatever other paraphernalia you've got on your particular bow. If it goes through some of them have got actually a hole that they go through because of the front end has got a bridge over it. Some of them don't. So, you always got to pay attention to whatever it's going to hit on the way out. Now, some of the crossbows have little nylon rollers or wheels or whatever that are set up for a three fletch arrow. So if you stick a 4-fletch on there, you can have all sorts of problems. No telling where that arrow is going to end up. So
Yeah.
you have to pay attention to the mechanical arrangement of your crossbow to start with, and then try to get that arrow to come out the best it will. You also have to pay attention to spine, and it's unclear to me at the moment whether the spine straight up away from the rail is best, or the spine straight down against the rail is best. But what's clear to me is you need to do it the same all the time. So spine is important, I think.
Well, a lot of people don't realize that there is a difference in spine depending on which way you turn that arrow shaft.
Well, yeah, and the way it flexes is, like I said, it's going to flex with the stiff side on the outside of the curve and the weak side on the inside of the curve. And then when it flexes, it's going to bounce that arrow off of that rail. And so, yeah, it's one of the things that you got to pay attention to. And then, of course, now one thing I have not found, and a lot of people are insistent on it, and I've had the PH stop me and say, no, we need to turn your broadhead there so that it's oriented with the blade straight up and down, or the blade crossways, or
I haven't
whatever.
found that to be true either.
I haven't found that to make much difference. Or haven't found it to make
enough with
difference.
Tuned air, I found no difference.
So
turn that broadhead
it's
any
not
way
enough
you
for
want
me to notice anyway. So that's what I can say about that. And then, like I said, spine is important. I've had them where shoot them if they're too stiff, and man, that thing wiggles and waggles all the way down to the target. And you get the spine right, and they come out of there and they fly pretty much straight to your target. And that makes a big difference when it hits the target. If that arrow hits that target and it's wiggling off sideways when it hits, you're not going to get the penetration you need. So we were talking about lawn darts earlier in a kind of joking manner, but lawn darts are a good example of front of center right there, man. Those things are heavily weighted to the front.
They're crazy. Just regular darts are crazy for their size.
You're right. Yeah. So anyway, what else did we need to cover about tuning?
Okay, well, you covered this question on knock tuning pretty well there. So we can omit that one. Do you find paper tuning effective, or do you use bear shaft versus fletched point of impact? In other words, what method of tuning do you use?
Well, at some point or another, I use all of them, and it's really more related to my schedule than it is to anything else. But normally, I start out with the paper tuning because I want to know, when I shoot that thing, is it coming off sideways or whatever it is. And so if I'm punching a nice hole in there, then that allows me to go on to uh, worrying about my aim and my weight and all that stuff, how it's flying at different points in its trajectory and that sort of thing. So yeah, I use the paper tuning. I use every tool I can think of to, like I said, the important part of this happens in a microsecond, a micro fraction of a second at 10,000 miles away from home, 2, maybe 3 days of traveling to get there. So when that happens, you don't want to say, "Oh, I should have done this or I should have done that."
Yeah, right. It's too late.
Yeah, it's too late. So a friend of mine says, "Don't shoot all over yourself." So you do everything you can think of, and so that after you've spent a gazillion dollars and you're exhausted from flying and eating airline food, all that, you get over there in a foreign country and you're a gazillion miles from home and you pull the trigger, everything works right. Then your flight home is very comfortable, very relaxing, and you just smile and like that. So I had an interesting experience one time. I was coming home from a trip, and there was a young man and his sister and their dad, and they had been to Africa and had been hunting. And he was, I don't know, I'm 14, 15, 16 years old, something like, maybe not quite that old. I don't know. Anyway, a young man. And his sister a little bit younger and everything. But he noticed I had a camouflage hat on and, some camouflage jacket probably. And so he asked me if I'd been hunting in Africa. And I said, yeah. So he starts talking. They'd been on their first hunt in Africa. And he was all excited about it. So he started telling me about, what he got and everything like that. So he was very excited, kind of decompressing from his trip there. And so I let him talk and encouraged him and like that. Then he said, oh, he lowered his voice real low, whispered to me. He says, also, we got a zebra, but we don't tell my sister because she likes zebras. And I said, okay, we won't talk about that one. But when you come home from a trip, that's the way you ought to be feeling, especially a long trip. And if you're coming home saying, "Oh, I should have done this, I should have done that," oh, there's only one person to blame for that, and that's you. So do everything you can think of, tune that thing up, and get it going right. That's my opinion.
What I'd like to end this podcast with is I want you to tell the story of your puku hunt and why you insisted on retrieving the animal.
Well, I used to watch these shows. Well, I still do, whatever they're on, but used to watch these shows on Saturday morning and Sunday morning like that when I could. I saw Fred Bear hunting, and all these different people hunting. And what about Fred Bear was impressive because he snuck up on this grizzly bear and made a great shot there and shot that grizzly bear right in the ass with an arrow. And but the point to what Ed's talking about there is you'd see these guys hunting in Africa and the trackers and the gun bearers and all that were always black folks, and so you had a white hunter and a white PH. They'd shoot something, and then if it was in the water or if it was in the brush or whatever, the trackers would always go in. So I always was not comfortable with that. I thought, why do you send the black guys in and the white guys stay out, you know, in the clear? And so I always swore I wasn't going to do that. And then it was a matter of I I want to, if I shoot it, it's my responsibility to take care of it,
Yeah, right.
not somebody else's. If I'm physically capable of doing that. And so I shot this puku, and puku always live around the water, and uh, they're never very far from the water. So I shot this puku, and he takes off and heads right for the water, and out in the middle of the lake he goes. And he's paddling for the distant shore there. So then he gets out there, and it, you know, he, instead of falling over 40, 50 yards from where you shot him, well, he gets over 40, 50 yards out in the water. His head goes down, his butt's bouncing up and down there. So we got to go retrieve this puka out in this water. Didn't know how deep it was or anything. So, so my PH tells our two trackers there to go retrieve him. I said, no, I'll go get him. So I shed my boots and my short, my jeans and like that. So I go out there in my underwear, get in that water, and that water was freezing cold. You got to remember that I usually went in the summertime because you teach school during the year, and
Well, that's
the
their
only
winter.
time you got to do things in the summertime. So, uh, so I go in the summertime over there, and that's their winter time, which is their time to hunt and everything. So go over there, the coldest time of their year. I hit that water, and I thought, well, they always tell you there's crocodiles in every body of water around. Don't think that there's not crocodiles there just because you don't see them. Well, I hit that water, and I thought, well, if there's a crocodile in here, I'll be able to outrun him. So, it was so cold. Then I thought, well, the problem would be if you step on one, and he steps on you or something like that. But it was just my ethical position that I didn't send somebody else. I didn't sit there and enjoy the fun, and then when it got hard or dangerous, I step back, send somebody else in to do that.
Right.
It's my ethics. And ethics are the kind of thing that's the way you act when nobody else is watching, right?
That's right.
So anybody can be good when somebody's watching them. But so I went out there and retrieved this puku. Well, this was a man-made pond, and it was an irrigation pond. So they pump into it and gather water in it during the rainy season or during the year. And then during the dry season, they pump out of it to irrigate the crops. And, but still yet, those ponds, even though they're man-made ponds, they still have crocs and hippos in them. And so, I got out there and I was about shoulder deep in water when I got to the thing. Well, my little trackers there, they were trying to keep up. They insisted on going out there with me. Well, they were having to hop up and down to keep their head above water. When I was shoulder deep, I'm 6'3", so I was shoulder deep. They weren't. So anyway, that's I retrieved the thing, got him back up there close enough where they could get a hand on it, and we all got it back to shore. Took pictures and whatnot like that. But I think is that the story you were talking about, Ed?
That's the story.
What's a puku?
So, it's antelope. Let's see. I'd have to go upstairs to show you a picture. Or
I'll find one on the
There's some
internet and
all
post it
animals,
on the
but
video.
they're a
Yep.
they're a medium-sized antelope, and they live around the water all the time, and they eat that fresh green grass. They really love that fresh green grass after it's rained and the water's come up and then the water goes down. They got those plains there where the flood plains where that fresh green grass starts coming in, but they're never too far away from water. And when this one got hit with that arrow, that's exactly where he went, was his refuge. There was the water. And so we had to follow him in. I didn't know if I needed to buy fishing lessons for that trip or not, but
Yeah, right.
so don't know if that was spearfishing or crossbow hunting, but that's that was a memorable experience.
Well, along with what you mentioned there, I did my apprenticeship under Gordon Cormack, my buddy, and he was the last of the old school hunters, educated up in East Africa. And when we followed anything that was wounded, we flanked the tracker. In other words, we were side by side with him. We were looking out there for the animal to get up out of the brush and charge us. And they were following the tracks. We didn't send them in alone, but I've noticed, just like you, PHs now don't do that. They send the trackers in. And that to me is not ethical. That you're putting them in extreme danger.
Well, yeah,
And
they're out there with.
you should be right there with them to stop that animal. You got your big rifle and you're right beside them. And like I discussed with you before, with my trackers before hunting season, I took all my rifles down with my trackers with me, and we had the witch doctor bless them so that they would stop any charging animal. And so our trackers had extreme faith. They didn't bolt and run when an animal got up because the witch doctor had said the rifle is going to stop him.
No kidding.
That was
That's
when you
smart.
told me that
About
story. That was
$35
excellent.
a year.
I'm going to keep that in mind because that would have come in handy a couple of times. And, a couple of times I've gone out and those guys will look at that crossbow like, "What the heck is this thing?"
Yeah, right.
And
Yep.
they're used to guns. You say, "Okay, I'm going to shoot my crossbow," and they'll put their fingers in their ears. And
Right.
so now after I shot my hippo, I never had to touch that bow again. Every time we went to go somewhere, one of them would run over and grab that bow and carry it for me. But until then, I carried it myself because they had absolutely no respect for that thing. It didn't make any noise.
That's awesome.
But boy, when
Yeah.
they saw a stick an arrow through a hippo, they loved that.
Yes, some of the Africans do. They relate the noise to
Yeah.
how well it kills.
Yep. Yep.
Well, it's been a good time. This is the longest podcast. I'll probably break this into 2 pieces.
Okay.
This is my first 2-cigar podcast.
Well, did you have any more questions, Ed?
I know.
Nope, that finished it off.
That was it. Okay.
So we email you to get a book?
Well, email, check, money order,
Yeah.
whatever.
Money talks.
I think I could.
You can mention that you're doing a new version of the book probably in the next year.
Yeah, it's
Or so.
going to take me a little while. One of the things I was going to include was your 12 factors in there because that's really the key to the whole book. Was I basically followed your 12 factor thing, and even though I was using a crossbow on that stuff, it's all still applies. And so, in order to give you due credit for your contribution and all the research you've done, for which you never got paid for, I'm sure. So, like any other research. So I was going to mention those and give you due credit in there for that, but I wanted you to look at it before I went to publish it because I want to make sure I get it right.
Yeah, we'll get it all right.
You know, I've seen so many times when people are misquoted, either unintentionally or intentionally. And that's one of the things about academia and writing papers and stuff is you want to get all that stuff accurate. And
Absolutely.
So I will mention that in my new version, and then I'm wanting to expand it into American game also. So toward that end, I've got a bear hunt scheduled. So I'm going to hunt some American stuff here, and with the crossbow. That's what I was wanting to get a hold of Troy about with pigs. If she had any research you wanted to do with the crossbow, tell you that I could make myself available for anything like that.
Yeah, you may have to come down and whack a couple, or we'll shoot them with a freaking gun, whatever it takes, so we have test animals, whichever way we want to do it. I'm about to get to the point now where I want to do more testing than hunting part, and I'm just going to start popping them with rifles, and so I have test animals because there's things I want to know, like the velocity exit thing. I just need one. I don't need to go shoot it with a bow. I just need two of them so I can try to figure out how that works, you know?
Right.
And, that would be.
I think that would be excellent. I've got video of a what the heck did I shoot there? I got an animal, a couple of them actually, where I saw the arrow go in and come out, and one of them, the arrow hit a rock and made a shower of sparks out there.
Right, that's moving.
So had your old flint and steel thing going on there at super speed, but anyway, one of them, I see the arrow just before it hits the animal, and in the next frame, that arrow is out the other side of that animal. Jeez. And that's 30 frames per second. So that's 1/30th of a second.
Right.
Between the time that arrow was out in the air, hadn't touched the animal yet, and in the very next frame, it was in the air after it had already passed through the animal.
Gosh.
And so it's a 30th of a second for all that. But I think your slow motion video of it coming out of the animal and everything is an excellent idea. It needs to be, and trying to get a chronograph on that would be an excellent way to do it.
Yeah, we're going
to. Like I said, you know, I can see that in the video, but I don't have any kind of time frame. And when you're watching it, it doesn't mean a whole lot to you. If you had a chronograph on that other side, that'd be very meaningful as to how much.
Don't give me a call about that, Troy. We'll talk about that. And I think we've got a way to do it.
No problem.
Ed and I kicked over several ideas there, so about how to set that up so it could be done.
Okay. Well, thank you both for your time, Jim. Thank you. But like I said, if somebody on this is watching this and they're still here with us, they email you, your name's right here on the screen, and I'll put it up on the video throughout the video. But just email you for a book, because I sure as heck want a copy, and be cool to have it for the thumbnail, actually. So need to work on that. But I appreciate you guys, and thanks for all the knowledge. And now, as always, when I talk to somebody who's done this much research, I have more questions, fewer answers. Thank you very much. You and Ed, every time I do this, because it just...
Yes. Thank you, Jim. I really appreciate it.
One answer leads to 12 questions, right?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Everybody have a great day. Yo, hey, this is a 3-part series, and you're looking at part 3. So if you stumbled upon part 3 and you haven't seen part 1 or part 2, I recommend you do so. This is a very long podcast. We were almost 3 hours, so I busted up into 3 pieces. Here's the thumbnail for the first, what the first video looks like. It says number 1 on it, and the next one says number 2. The links to both of those will be in the description. So if you happened upon number 3 somehow, and you're, outside of a month or so of publication of this video, there'll be a playlist on my channel. This is Jim Aken. And there will also be links in the description to part 1 and 2, because there's a lot of story behind this other than some cool guy shooting a hippo. So watch 1 and 2, and it'll give you some context on 3, but there's still great information here. Thanks for watching.